Welcome to eCommerce Deep Dive, a podcast featuring the biggest players in retail and e-commerce. Your host is John Ghiorso, founder and CEO of Orca Pacific, a Mighty Hive company. For today's episode, John is joined by Stacy Hanks, Vice President of Global Digital Commerce at SureWerx's. John and Stacy discuss her experience working at Amazon, Masterlock, and now SureWerx's, misconceptions that brands have about Amazon, and how to use Amazon's leadership principles to your advantage as a brand. Thanks for listening and enjoy the show.
All right, Stacy, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me, John. I'm very excited to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. So, it'd be great maybe to just start off. You've had quite a career already in e-commerce, working at Amazon, working at a couple brands. It'd be great just to give the audience a kind of lay of the land in terms of what you'd have been up to for the last, decade plus. You've been in this space a while.
Yeah, it's shocking when I start looking at the calendar and I realize how long it's been. I started my career in a variety of outside sales management. And before I joined Amazon, I was in, outside sales management in a CPG function, kind of out in the streets at brick and mortar. And Amazon reached out to me and, I started exploring the opportunity. And, in 2011, 2012, everyone was familiar with Amazon, but it certainly wasn't the behemoth that it is today, right?
Sure.
And so, I joined and, I talked to a lot of my friends, I'm originally from the Seattle area. I was not actually in Seattle at the time, but I talked to my friends and they kind of said, yeah, anyone's kind of working at Amazon right now. It's kind of the hot new thing. Everyone's pretty excited about it. And so I joined I joined on the textbooks team, and I had actually taken a role. It was a product management role, working at securing textbook buyback at universities. And I started on Monday, and by Wednesday, they had actually decided we were no longer going to pursue that. So I had a new job by Wednesday. So I had moved over to the vendor management role, and spent, almost 4 years on the textbooks team, both on vendor management, as well as running the marketing team there. And then I actually moved over to our global vendor management team. And that was a really exciting team. It was a little bit un-Amazonian in the fact that it was designed to be very high touch. It was really developing these high-level relationships with Amazon's biggest vendors in the US, but then leveraging that to accelerate their business outside the US. So in India, in China, in Japan, in Mexico, as well as onboarding many of the other new countries. And so that was, it was a really exciting time because Amazon was looking at a lot of new locations, whether that was Australia at the time, or any of the other, new countries Amazon has since opened.
And when you were in the global role, what era was that, just to kind of frame that, because things move so quickly?
Yeah, so that would have been 2017, 2016, 2017, 2018.
Okay, that's great. And then from there, were you another role, or did you go to the brand side?
Yeah, so that was when I actually went over to the brand side because I had no intention of honestly leaving Amazon. As there's no shortage of opportunity within Amazon. But when I thought about where the most opportunity at Amazon, it was really moving more tech heavy. A lot of Alexa and that type of thing. And I realized that I really enjoyed customers. I really enjoyed creating meaningful customer experiences to sell more product. That's kind of what I've always done. And I realized that I had a lot of knowledge and a lot of perspective on how to help brands succeed at Amazon, right? I got a lot of that, from the global team because I was no longer talking to just the sales managers, right? When you're at Amazon and you're a vendor manager, you're talking to just the core Amazon team. And in the global role, I was talking with, area VPs, global VPs, presidents, COOs, and really started to see that, oh my gosh, there's so much that brands and organizations don't understand about how to truly optimize Amazon. Like I could bring a lot of value, right? Like I could deliver a lot of results kind of on this other side. And at that point, Master Lock had reached out to me, and they were looking to build an e-commerce team, and they were looking for someone to lead that.
Yeah. Okay. That's great. So, you've obviously spent some time then on the brand side as well. So you have a really kind of interesting view. We could go so many different directions with this conversation, but something that selfishly is a hot topic in my world right now is global. I'm curious, what were some of the biggest revelations that brands had when you worked with them about Amazon Global? What were some of the biggest maybe misconceptions, things they learned? Like, what were the consistent kind of ahas that you saw with these? I assume very large scaled businesses in the U.S., but maybe just hadn't taken global as seriously.
Yeah. So that's a great question, John. And I think, that's even one I'll admit to still learning a little, learned a lot every day when it comes to that. But I think some of the things that I saw were in the rest of the world, the supply chains and the way customers shop is significantly more disaggregated than it is in the US, right? The US has a lot of retail square footage. There's more retail square footage per customer in the US than anywhere else.
Yeah, we like to shop.
Yep.
Yep.
And we like to shop at our big chains.
Yeah.
Right? We like to shop at big distribution centers, and that market looks a little bit different in the rest of the world. So it's a little bit harder to sometimes take, there's so many people that walk into a Home Depot. There's 2,000, 3,000 Home Depots. You put up a single display, and that display is replicated, and consumers see the exact same products and experience, and that helps Amazon, right? Because there's this consistent exposure of the same product. You don't have that in the rest of the world, right? So you've got to find different ways to kind of get that critical mass to be looking for those same products online, because there's so many different ways and places that are competing for those eyeballs.
Interesting. So does that lead to more kind of fragmentation across a catalog? Like you have less concentration in the top sellers in another market versus the US for kind of the big brands, or do they have kind of more competitors that may not be on their radar, like in North America, but all of a sudden they're kind of popping up in other countries?
Yeah, that's a good point, because I think you have a little bit of that where it's less focused on the head, kind of SKUs. But then there was also a different dynamic in, I think, a lot more protectionism of the smaller shops to not be on Amazon, right? And you're kind of going up sort of we all know the names of the folks you're going up against in the US, but there's a lot more, it's just done differently outside. I'm thinking of Europe, of these smaller chains, and they have these much stronger relationships of people calling on them. So there's a lot more fear of taking that business out of some of those local high street type shops and bringing that business online.
Yeah, interesting. So, you've had the perspective from the Amazon side and from the brand side. The conversation that comes up a lot for me as it relates to kind of how brands are structuring their internal teams, I would say with regard to Amazon, but really e-commerce broadly, is where should the e-commerce team or function sit? Should it sit in sales? Should it sit in marketing? Should it be a separate thing that works with both teams? And I think there's frankly, kind of good justifications for all of the above, depending on the org. But what's your perspective on this?
Yeah, this is a good one, because I like to think that maybe I'm a little less traditional, if not disruptive, when I think about this, because e-commerce isn't just sales and the traditional sales and what your sales leadership expects from Amazon, and it's very different than what your marketing leadership knows as their core of how to market. Right. So it's this really, really new function that I tend to find does best in its own right now. with sales resources, with marketing resources, but with this very specialized skill set, because anyone who's in e-commerce out there is every day talking about how quick they need to adapt, how fast things change. And if you think about a traditional core marketing team, right? Think about some of these big CPG teams with hundreds of brands and very specific, brand teams. They always can't react overnight. I think a lot of them are getting much, much better, but it's turning the Titanic sometimes. Yeah. But then in sales, right? We've all got Amazon numbers, right? We all have a number that we have to hit, and everyone loves. I always talk about Amazon. If you're a brand, it's the customer you love to hate and hate to love, because they deliver the growth, but man, they can be difficult to work with.
It can be tough. Yeah.
But sales has a very traditional view sometimes of the Amazon, and they want Amazon to act like a traditional customer, and Amazon doesn't act like that either. So I think it depends on how your leadership is set up to, are they going to let e-commerce run by their own rules? Because ultimately the most effective teams, the team I think that I ran at Amazon, we were part of sales, but we did sales, we did marketing, we were running the pay-per-click advertising. We were doing a lot of things that I think in traditional organizations would have been very siloed. And by having everyone in a single team who had one single goal of growing e-commerce, we were super nimble and super able to turn on a dime and deliver incredible results because of that.
Hey there, I'm Dave Zimmerman with Orca Pacific. I hope you're enjoying the show. I wanted to let you know this episode is brought to you by Orca Pacific, a Mighty Hive company. We're a full-service agency exclusively focused on Amazon, with capabilities for everything a brand needs to succeed on the platform. From advertising strategy, content development and SEO, to merchandising and marketing. If it relates to driving and converting demand on the platform, our dedicated teams are leaders in this space. Our robust suite of services includes expertise on the back end as well, from operational support, demand forecasting and planning, to the right fulfillment options, and higher level strategies like long-term planning, channel management, and access to beta programs. To learn more, visit our website at www.orcapac.com. That's ORCAPAC.com. And a business development manager will get you up to speed on how we can accelerate your Amazon business. Now, back to the show.
So I have a question. It's a little bit of a devil's advocate question, but I think it's something that would benefit our audience. So, historically, Amazon was run through sales orgs because they were just, well, at least for vendors, because they were a retailer, and so they just got put in the bucket with sales. I think as Amazon has pivoted more and more to a pay-to-play platform with advertising and yada, 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 obviously marketing is heavily involved. I'm starting to hear now the idea that actually you don't need sales at all. Like, this is really a function of just marketing. So I mean, assuming that your view is no, you need both. Why? Like, devil's advocate question. Why not just get rid of sales and run it entirely through marketing?
Yeah. So I think that's a great question, John, that I'd love to kind of talk about. What I mean when I say sales is it's got to be sales, because I think you have to plan like a salesperson, right? But that skill set, I think, looks very, very different than the traditional salesperson. A traditional salesperson is selling to the customer, and that customer being, selling to the retailer. It's a lot of relationship building, right? It's a lot of relationship building. It's a lot of, I spend a lot of time seeing how planograms are put together, and there's a lot of planogram work. The sales team that is most successful for Amazon may have never set foot in front of a customer, right? The relationship building is actually the last thing I'm looking for, right? You want a great person, but what you're looking for is someone who understands how to use data and how to manipulate the levers to drive sales. And that can be marketing, but a lot of the marketing talent right now is heavily based in offline traditional marketing functions, right? It's planogramming, it's packaging design, it's these core kind of marketing functions that maybe aren't always as data driven and analytical to drive those results, right? Because sometimes they're two spaces removed from the sales result, right? They're designing things, and that salesperson is then accountable for the results. And sometimes some good companies, that number goes back to the marketing team, but sometimes it stops at sales, right? And so to me, the sales function for Amazon is a data analyst almost,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. I think that's a really good way of putting it. And actually, maybe another way of framing it is that, the difference between a traditional retail buyer and a vendor manager is, I think there's an equivalent there between a traditional salesperson and an Amazon focused salesperson. It's not that you don't need a salesperson at all. It's just that is really a pretty different function and skill set if done the right way. So yeah.
I remember when I was, my hiring, my onboarding for an Amazon account manager is a Amazon case study. It's a spreadsheet, right? And it's tell me the actions and levers you would pull as a result of this spreadsheet, right? And it's really dialing down into things that I think are a little bit different than what a traditional sales, a sales manager might do with a traditional buyer, right? I remember going then to different, I had to flex my skills and kind of go back to my traditional sales skills when you're meeting with some of the other big .com sites out there that aren't Amazon, because they're looking for something a little bit different.
Sure. Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, obviously, communication and those sort of basic skills are always important, but yeah, I agree. I think the underlying skill sets are quite a bit different. Maybe switching gears here a little bit. We're all, I think, slowly coming out of the pandemic, and anyone in this industry had a wild year professionally last year. What was that like for you? What was it like to to kind of be in the tip of the spear in terms of one of the big shifts in e-commerce that's kind of ever happened due to COVID?
Yeah, it's a great question that I wish I wish I could say that I had this magical revelation of how to do it. But for us, it was easy for us to make that transition because I spent a lot of time building a really, really strong foundation. And for me, like, it is very important that my team feels empowered. They have a high degree of ownership, and they know exactly what their lane is and what their objectives are, right? And those objectives didn't change during COVID, right? They still had numbers, but how we maybe then adjusted some of the tactics and levers and activities looked a little bit different, right? We shifted to different products, right? We turned up advertising on some products and turned it down, but it was still business as usual because like we knew exactly what we had to do every day. And I'm sure if you've seen one of my, I've also spoken, for Profitero, type. I know you had Mike Black on here, but I talk a lot about this daily huddle where we track the most important metrics that affect our business every day. And so when you track those every day for several years, you go into a pandemic and you just see where the numbers change and you adjust to those numbers.
Yeah. So basically you had kind of all the infrastructure in place. It was like, okay, we're going to run the machine at like twice the speed, but it's still fundamentally the same machine with the same inputs, the same outputs. So it wasn't like throw everything out and, redo your strategy. That makes a lot of sense. I mean, for us, it was very similar. I also think that kind of supports the general idea, which I feel now like there's starting to be real consensus around this, which is that COVID really accelerated e-commerce. I mean, I mean, we know it accelerated e-commerce, but it accelerated the inevitable, I guess is what I'm saying. It didn't fundamentally shift the direction anything was headed. It just kind of sped that up by, I don't know, some people say 3-5 years, whatever. But yeah, that's definitely a familiar experience now for me.
One thing
Yeah.
that I do think that is kind of interesting, that I do think that we saw, and I'd be kind of interested to see, how other people feel about their assortments and their selections, and how it luckily we're not a health and personal care product or a CPG, because I think that just the pandemic threw that business on its head, right?
Yeah. By the way, trying to comp those numbers now is real fun. So yeah. Yeah, just do another 1,000% growth this year. That's our new,
yeah, it's the new normal, right?
Yeah.
But one thing I did notice is I love to talk about how Amazon has this endless shelf that has selection, right? But we've all kind of realized and started to learn that people think they want selection, but they kind of want the bestseller, right? They want the social proof of, if I type in a generic search term, what's the best thing I want? Right? Like what's the trash can that everyone's buying? I don't need 1,000 trash cans. I want this one. But then when you start, and our business was very much like that. Hey, the best sellers keep selling more. And, we've got the whole assortment up there, but, people gravitate towards the social proof of the most reviews, best sellers. But what we started to really see during the pandemic is there was a lot more assortment shopping. There was customers were spending a lot more time online, and they were actually, you could see that behavior was shifting of, well, I don't want just the bestseller. Let me actually look at the assortment a little bit. And, that was the challenge that had accelerated one of our pieces of, hey, how do we get better at selling the assortment and executing the good, better, best strategy online? That's the challenge on Amazon, is how do you really do that effectively? But we had to get better at that, because we saw, torso products, kind of that middle of the road.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, a lot more customers were looking at them because they were spending a lot more time online.
Yeah. Yeah. That's interesting. Yeah. We saw the same thing. We saw a lot more brand trial as well, in terms of, some of the disruptor brands that we work with. I would say a lot more willingness to try, category that's been bought many times, but for that customer, new brand. It was new to brand metrics. Some of these other metrics really shot up. And you can say some of that is because of just lack of supply. Well, the item I always buy is out, so I'm going to get a replacement. I'm not just going to not have it at all. But I also think there was some, I don't know, there was just, so much weird stuff happened with consumer behavior. Everyone decided to go out and buy bread makers all in the same week of the year, nationwide. Weird, odd sort of these things that will probably never happen again. Maybe now looking forward a little bit, curious to hear your opinion. And this one, there's certainly no right answer, but over the next kind of, I would say, midterm future, 2-3 years out, so long enough where we can get a little out there in our predictions. What are some of the things that you think brands are going to see happen with Amazon and e-commerce, maybe that are outside of the consensus or the obvious? Is there anything that you're going, oh, I think this is going to be a kind of a bigger trend or bigger maybe headwind than people realize?
Gosh, that's it's funny, because you always, if any of us in e-commerce had a crystal ball and knew what it was going to look like, we'd all go buy lottery tickets, right?
Or just buy Amazon stock, which I think we've all done.
Yeah, right. It might not be an exciting view, but I think people overestimate the impact of channelization. And I am firmly rooted in, you have to provide a great experience to your customer across all touch points.
So can you define that term? Like, how do you mean that?
Yeah. So I mean that wherever that customer wants to shop, whenever they're thinking about a purchase, you're there with a product offering. And whether that's in store, whether that's through Amazon, whether that's through your own social page, whether that's through another .com, right? You have you have that consistent experience, you have the same content, you have the same details, and you're willing to let that customer buy the products they want wherever, whenever they want, right? I think there's a lot of talk right now about, well, hey, if I sell this product here, I can't sell it there. I don't want these retailers to sell this product. I only want this customer to be able to buy this product through this channel. And I don't want to put this on my social. All those things to me are a little anti-customer, right? Like,
yeah.
As a customer, I don't think about, well, I'm an e-commerce shopper, and I mean, even though I 99% am, but I don't want to be put in a box. I don't want to be told when, where, and how I have to shop, right? I want to be able to experience and find information when and where I need it. I want to be able to, if I do want to go to the store, maybe I want to buy online and pick up in store. Maybe I want it delivered. I think there's a lot of blood, sweat, and tears trying to figure out exactly how to best serve the customer. The best service of the customer is whenever and however they want. And our biggest challenge is, how do we do it profitably?
Yeah. So basically not trying to make that decision for them, to say, like, listen, commerce is messy. There's reasons that all of these platforms, retailers, marketplaces, whatever, exist, because they have customers that like them, and maybe one day they like, going to Target, and the next day they like buying something on Amazon. Yeah. So I think showing up is important. And I think, a concept that I was recently talking about was kind of this idea that, like, there needs to be a minimum bar, which actually probably that bar is higher than most brands realize, of showing up, of content, of consistent information, of, selection, all of those things. And that needs to be more or less ubiquitous. I would say, there's exceptions and channel control things, but you need to show up. But then on top of that, that's where you actually need to start customizing things. So you have this minimum layer of kind of, we're good everywhere. And then we're specifically catering to the platform or to the customer experience in these different environments, kind of on top of that. I don't know if you agree with that, but I think that's an interesting idea.
I really like that. I like that concept a lot, because I think what you're saying is raise the bar everywhere, and then maybe to help deliver on the channel or the customer that you're really targeting, you raise that bar even higher in certain cases, right? But I think every brand out there probably has an opportunity to raise the bar in more places. That's showing up. And then how do you even bring more? Yeah. How do you bring more customization to that?
So when you think about that kind of bar raising, and maybe to get a little more specific or practical about it, when we talk about content, what are some of the things that you see most brands still kind of missing, or not, maybe not fully optimizing, fully taking advantage of?
Yeah, so this is an easy question for me. I think the number one thing that I see and is, we've got to remember that over 50%, and now the numbers change on who's doing the research, but 50% plus are experiencing a product for the first time on their phone. They're not actually going through your whole product page. They're not always making it to your A+ content. How do you create better images that tell a story, right? A great image is not just the front, the back, and maybe it in the packaging. It's telling me a story about why this product is so great, right? It's adding more of the feature bullets to that image. It's showing it in use. It's creating really rich lifestyle images. There's a lot that are getting really good at this, but there's a lot of work that still needs to be done.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. So basically the assets, I think that's, that's something that, and I think there's a lot of people will resonate in, like, I'll say in our industry, whether they're working for an agency or a brand, but that don't necessarily have direct control or ability to go far enough upstream to, like, asset creation. So they're sort of like, well, here you go. We took a picture of the three sides of the package. These are your images. Oh, really? Like, that's it. So, I think that I think that the idea that real creative production will start to become more of a differentiator in e-commerce. I think is going to see, I mean, you could argue that's happening right now, but I think that it will start to accelerate as a trend, because I think that bar will get set higher and higher, where like just shooting the size of your package, like that's not going to even, right now you may get in the game. That's not even going to get you in the game in a couple of years.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. And the data's there. I mean, if you've talked to, anyone about content, I did a lot of work with Visit, right? And so their artificial intelligence, assessment of imagery, right? And they were able to help put data points and identify more of the ways that we needed to create better content, right? And when we take their recommendations and we create these storytelling of images, right? We show you how to use the product in an image, right? That a lot of people aren't showing you how to use the product in the image. That seems, a little counterintuitive. But guess what? Glance views doubled, conversion increases 50 basis points. The results are incredibly there. And I think a lot of brands feel they're really close to their products. And they if you spend too long with the product, you just assume that everyone knows about the product.
Yeah. I think that's a great point. And I know, I think we're all guilty of this, is like, oh, well, how do you not know that this term we use to describe it is like, how do you not know the meaning of that? Or how do you not know that the product's like, it's about this big and not like this big, or, it's like, you just, you get that level of comfort. And actually, I've seen that happen across organizations. We've gone into an entire organization. Everyone's using this name for this thing. And it's like, you realize no one outside of like your industry talks about your product in this way. Like they use, and they're like, oh, well, but that's not an accurate term. Well, it doesn't matter. Like that's what people call it. So we have to put that like in the content and in the keywords. And I mean, maybe that's obvious to folks, but you do. I think anyone who's kind of too close to something, you can get that kind of myopic view if you're not careful. So.
Yeah. And that's why I love the Amazon search terms report, right? Like, cause you actually see what people search for and then what they buy. And 9 times out of 10, it's not the word that marketing told you that it should be, right? I don't want to throw marketing under the bus, but you get that a lot of, well, this is how this product works. So this is what we call it. Well, no one else is calling it that, right? Like,
yep, absolutely.
So
the amount of search terms that say something thing, it's like no one's putting it to something thing on their package, but there you go. I know, Stacy, we're kind of running a little short on time here, so I want to be respectful. Is there anything that that you want to share with our audience that you think is just interesting, that you think they would benefit from knowing?
Oh gosh. John, you said we were short on time, right?
I was like, no, that's probably an hour answer, but
I think, I would go back to, don't underestimate the power of your content and the power of over explaining and raising the bar on products that you don't think are exciting. Customers, when they're on that detail page, no matter how unexciting your product might be or how basic it might be, or, well, the customer needs this. Oh gosh, you know what? There's 15,000 other people selling the same widget. So you have to make your widget sound exciting.
Yeah.
And I think that's a big, it's not that exciting, but I think it's a good little tidbit to remember, that never underestimate the power of good content.
Yeah, for sure. And just give them the information to make an informed decision. No, I love that. I think that's a great place to end. I guess last question here: how do people get a hold of you? Are you active on social? Any of that?
Yes, well, I'm very active on LinkedIn. You can always find me there, Stacy Vautour Hanks. You can always find me there. I'm sure I'm connected in a multiple of ways. Currently, I don't even think we got to there. I'm the Vice President of Global Digital Commerce for SureWerx's. Obviously, if you have safety or PPE needs, that's our wheelhouse. So we can help deliver those. But always looking forward to engage and have conversations about anything and everything e-commerce related.
Yeah, that's awesome, Stacy. I appreciate it. I know there's I'm sure a lot more we could do a follow-up episode on. So hey, thanks for being on.
Of course. Thank you so much for having me. Thank you again, John. I really appreciate it.